In 2025, an 84-year-old man makes a shocking confession before dying. He claims to have witnessed or even participated in a brutal crime that took place during the summer of 1991. His final words make their way to a retired detective who had once investigated that very case and failed. Driven by guilt, a thirst for justice, and a chance at redemption, he decides to reopen the investigation on his own, only to discover that the truth has never been so far, and yet so close. The confession: it was a muggy summer afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina, when 84-year-old Franklin Rowe took his final breath, but not before whispering a secret that had haunted him for 3 decades. The room was quiet. The ceiling fan spun lazily, casting circular shadows on the wall. Nurse Annette, used to the peaceful routine of St. Margaret's nursing home, wasn't expecting anything unusual that Friday. Franklin was one of the quiet ones, a Vietnam War veteran who walked with difficulty, barely spoke, had no visitors, and no family. He simply sat on the porch, reading old newspapers, staring into the void for hours. But that day, he called for her. And in a faint, fading voice, he said, "Someone needs to know what I did before God takes me." Annette moved closer, taking his hand gently. "Would you like a priest, Mr. Franklin?" "No, I want justice, even if it's late." She called the on-duty staff. Minutes later, a social worker arrived with a pocket recorder protocol for undubbed life confessions. She began with standard questions: name, date of birth, medical history. But Franklin interrupted with something no one expected. "In 1991, I saw what they did to that girl." He paused, and I did nothing. The room went still. We dug, we buried her, swore no one would ever know. But I see her every night, in the back of my mind, in my dreams. She won't leave. The social worker hesitated. "Who, Mr. Franklin? Who do you see in your dreams?" He closed his eyes, breathing heavily, then whispered, "Samantha. Samantha Blake. The girl from the lake." She swallowed hard. That name wasn't common, but to anyone living in South Carolina in the 1990s, it echoed like an unhealed wound. Samantha Blake vanished during the summer of 1991. She was just 17, blonde, smiling, a strata student. Last seen at a graduation party near the lake in Somerville, her body was never found. The case made headlines for weeks, then faded, like so many others. And now, 34 years later, a dying man said, "I know what happened." The recording was sent to the local police department, where it landed in the hands of a rookie investigator. But with no new evidence, only the vague words of a dying man, the case was once again shelved, marked as no further action. But fate had other plans. That same night, the social worker, unsure why, mailed a copy of the tape to an address she found in an old newspaper clipping. It belonged to a former detective, Henry Callahan. It's the same man who led the original Samantha Blake investigation in 1991. The same man who still carried the guilt of never solving it. Henry had been retired for 12 years. He lived alone on John's Island, tending tomatoes and scribbling drafts of a crime novel he never quite finished. His face carried the look of a man who had seen too much. His white beard masked a strong jaw, but his eyes were fogged with regret. When he received the envelope and played the recording, he thought it was some kind of prank. But the moment Franklin's voice came through the old tape recorder, something inside Henry cracked. Franklin's voice was weak, but every word burned. "I saw her run. She fell. And then they grabbed her. I couldn't move. Oh, at me and I." Turned away, Henry stopped the tape, sat in silence, then stood, walked to the back room, and opened a wooden box he hadn't touched in years. Inside were the Blake files, photos, notes, lake maps, interview transcripts, newspaper clippings, and the worst part? The letter he'd written to Samantha's family years ago, saying there was nothing more he could do. But now, there was. The dying voice of a witness, and a name that still haunted him. Henry sat at his desk, spread the papers out with trembling hands. Kay whispered to himself, "I promised that mother I'd bring her daughter home. Maybe." The This is my last chance to keep that promise. The next morning, he put on his old brown investigator's coat, slipped his worn-out pistol into the holster, grabbed a thermos of bitter coffee, and hit the road, because now the case was open again. The girl from the lake. Summer of 1991. Summerville, South Carolina. The heat lingered in the air, peaking at 97 degrees. The cicadas buzzed nonstop, filling the space between the tall trees with a sound that was both familiar and oppressive. The town was small, sleepy. Wide streets, a modest town square, and Ridley Lake. Surrounded by woods and often used for fishing, family picnics, and the occasional teenage party that drifted too far from adult supervision. Samantha Blake, 17, was one of the town's brightest. Daughter of 2 local school teachers, top of her class, captain of the debate team, quiet but always kind. She wasn't the center of attention in school hallways, but people knew her, and they respected her. She had a soft spot for astronomy, often seen sketching constellations in her notebook or quoting Carl Sagan in class. On June 16, 1991, Samantha attended a senior graduation party by the lake, an unofficial event organized by a group of students. Around 30 teenagers gathered with speakers, soda, and, though forbidden alcohol, it was meant to be just another carefree summer night. Samantha wasn't the party type, but her best friend, Rachel Green, had insisted she come. Samantha showed up around 7 p.m. wearing a floral dress and carrying a small backpack with a blanket, a flashlight, and her beloved journal. Rachel later confirmed that Samantha spent most of the night sitting by the water, watching the stars shimmer. In the lake's reflection, a typical habit. She kept to the edges, away from the noise and games. By 10 p.m., Rachel couldn't see her anymore. She figured Samantha had gone for a walk or to the restroom. But by midnight, as people began to leave, Rachel realized Samantha was truly gone. The flashlight was later found lying near the trail. That led back to the road. The police were contacted the next morning. The case was taken seriously from the start. Search dogs, divers in the lake, aerial scans. Locals organized search groups. Flyers were printed and stapled to every utility pole. Still, there were no solid leads, no footprints, no screams heard, no pieces of clothing found. Her journal, discovered in Rachel's car, became the only tangible clue. The last few entries were chilling. The stars feel farther away tonight. Someone's watching me. I'm not sure I'm safe here. I need to leave. But something's holding me back. If I disappear, I hope someone remembers my name. Those words became folklore, passed around in radio, specials, and true crime blogs as the haunting voice of the girl from the lake. Back in 1991, Detective Henry Callahan, then 42, was assigned to lead the investigation. He had already solved 2 high-profile kidnapping cases and was known for his attention to detail and stubborn pursuit of the truth. He interviewed more than 60 people, partygoers, locals, travelers, passing through town. He reconstructed timelines, analyzed tire tracks, reviewed footage from gas stations. But everything led to dead ends. There were suspects: Kyle Ramsey, 19, and Donnie Fields, 18. 2 boys with minor priors and reputations for aggression. They had been drinking that night, and their stories didn't always match. Each had alibis, confirmed by others. Without a body, a crime. Scene or witnesses. The DA refused to press charges. Henry begged for more time. He knew something was off, but pressure mounted. From city officials, media, and even the department. Eventually, the case was closed. The town was exhausted. The Blake family sank into silent mourning. Unable to grieve fully, unable to move forward, Henry never let it go. For years, he kept a copy of Samantha's missing persons report in his wallet. He visited the lake every year on the anniversary. He even sent apology letters to Samantha's mother, though they were never answered. He retired early, cited burnout. But everyone knew the truth. And now, in 2025, Samantha Blake's name had returned, carried in the last breath of a dying man. I saw her fall. I did nothing. They held her down then. They buried her. But I know where. Henry felt it deep in his bones. The case file that haunted him was being reopened, and this time, he swore. He wouldn't walk away again. Asterisk. The digit was early morning when Henry returned to Somerville. The town hadn't changed much. The diner still had the same faded awning. The gas station on the corner still sold scratch-offs and bad coffee. But for Henry, everything felt different. Because now, he wasn't just retracing steps. He was chasing a ghost. Samantha's ghost. The first place he went was the old Ridley Lake trailhead. The trees were taller now, the grass thicker, but he remembered every curve of the path. The same trail where Samantha's flashlight had been found. The same place. Where every search had begun and ended. 34 years ago, but this time, Henry wasn't alone. After contacting the local sheriff's department and presenting the audio recording, the journal, and his reopening notes, he received reluctant support. No one wanted to believe there could be something new to uncover, but the evidence was undeniable. With permission from the landowners and supported by a small forensic team, a targeted dig began. They started in the area marked on an old, hand-drawn map found among Franklin Rowe's belongings. A crude sketch with an X beneath a tree on the far western edge of the lake property. The soil was dry and compact. Hours passed, nothing but rocks and roots. But then one of the cadaver dogs gave a signal. A forensic tech called out. Shovels hit something different. Soft earth. Disturbed ground, Henry knelt down, heart pounding. Moments later, fragments began to emerge. Cloth fibers, something metallic, bracelet. Then bones, the remains, were small, delicate, female, found curled on their side in a shallow grave no more than 3 feet deep. Still around her neck, remarkably preserved by the dry soil, was a charm necklace shaped like a star. One Rachel Green had once described in detail. The one Samantha wore everywhere. DNA testing would later confirm it, but Henry already knew. They had found Samantha Blake. The town reacts the news hit Somerville like a thunderclap. Samantha Blake found after 34 years. Read the front page of the Somerville Gazette. For a generation, she had been nothing but a missing person. Poster. A story passed down by parents, a warning told in whispers. Now, she was no longer missing. She was real. The truth had finally surfaced. Local radio stations replayed old segments. Former classmates, now adults with children, gathered at the lake to leave flowers. Rachel Green, long moved to Georgia, drove back to attend the memorial, and Henry. Henry sat in his car for hours the night after the discovery. It's parked near the lake. He watched the trees, listened to the wind, and whispered one thing into the night. I'm sorry. Should have found you sooner. It's justice delayed, but not. Denetho Franklin Rowe had passed. His voice had triggered the unraveling of a decades-long silence. After analyzing his recorded confession, the state attorney's office confirmed it, would reopen several cold cases with similar patterns, cases from towns where Franklin had previously lived. But for Somerville, its focus remained on Samantha. An official town vigil was held at the community center with candles, photos, and readings from her recovered journal. Henry was asked to speak. He hesitated, but eventually stepped forward. I failed her, but she didn't stay silent. Not in her writing, not in her memory, and not in the hearts of the people who refused to let her go. Place to remember 6. Months later, in the same clearing where she was found, a memorial garden was built. A single bench, a small plaque with her name, and below it, one of the last lines from her journal, carved into stone. If I disappear, I hope someone remembers my name. They did. Samantha. They remembered. And now, the world does too. Asterisk, asterisk, the shadows of 1991. Returning to Somerville after so many years was like opening a drawer that had been locked for decades. The scent of the past was unmistakable. Time had passed. Yes, there were. New stores, renovated avenues. And the old cafe where Henry used to drink his morning coffee was now a generic pharmacy. But the town's essence was still there, and with it, the ghosts. Henry parked in front of the old police station. The faded sign, the dusty windows, and the bell above the door still jingled the same way they did 30 years ago. Inside, the current sergeant was young, with a patchy beard and a wary look. Can I help you, sir? Henry held up his expired badge, more out of formality than anything else. Henry Callahan, I worked the Blake case. I'm here because of the confession." The young man sat up straighter. He'd heard the name before. "I thought that was closed." "It's just the delusion of a dying old man, right?" Henry stared back. What if it wasn't? Silence. The sergeant handed Henry a digital copy of the audio, the digitized files from the original case, and, reluctantly, an informal authorization to consult as a civilian. "Just don't stir things up too much. The town's quiet these days, and the Blake family, well, they've been through enough." Henry nodded curtly and drove straight to Ridley Lake. It was exactly as he remembered, calm, serene, and hauntingly silent. The same dirt path. The same wooden bench where Rachel once said Samantha had last sat. It's the same trail that narrowed as it entered the forest. He walked slowly, analyzing every step. On the old case map, there was a point he had marked himself. A bend between the trees where the dogs had stopped tracking. At the time, he thought it was the end of the trail. Now, he believed it was the beginning of the truth. Kneeling down, he noticed something strange. The soil there was firmer, like it had been disturbed, compacted, and untouched for a very long time. It was subtle, but he recognized that kind of detail. He marked it with tape and noted the coordinates. That night, Henry decided to revisit. The two names that had never left his mind: Kyle Ramsey and Donnie Fields. The drunk teenagers from the party. The ones with shaky alibis and evasive eyes. By now, they would be nearly 50 years old. Kyle was a mechanic, still living on the outskirts of town. Connie had vanished off the map. Henry went to the garage where Kyle worked. He found a man with a thick beard, a sweat-stained shirt, grease-covered, hands and eyes that avoided his at all costs. "Callahan," Kyle said, when he recognized him. "Thought you were tired." "I did, but apparently..." Samantha's case didn't... Kyle let out a bitter laugh. 30 years later, and you're still chasing this? And you're still afraid of me, Kyle." The man stiffened. "I got nothing to say, but someone did. Franklin Rowe. He talked before he died." Said he? "Saw everything? Said you were there?" Kyle slowly put down his wrench. "Franklin, that old nut job? The same?" he confessed. "Now I want to know your part in this." Kyle was silent for a long while. Then he wiped his face like he was brushing away memories too old to name. "I didn't kill her," he finally said, "but I saw her run into the woods. I saw Donnie go after her. And I didn't do anything." Henry's stomach turned. So Franklin was telling the truth. "I tried to forget Callahan. I swear. I thought it was just a fight. Thought she'd come back. Then when I realized she was gone, it was too late." "Where's Donnie?" "He vanished. In 97, nobody knows where he went. Some say he moved to Arizona. But, hell, I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up buried somewhere, too." Henry took notes. Before he left, he looked Kyle in the eye one last time. "If I find out you lied again, you'll answer for it. Even if it's in front of the whole damn town." Back at the hotel, Henry printed maps, combed through records, marked key points. Franklin's confession, Kyle's words, and the pages from Samantha's journal drew an almost invisible line. It's but a real one. She had tried to escape. She ran toward the opposite side of the main trail, to where the terrain dipped, to where no one had searched properly, to where no one wanted to dig. The only thing still haunting Henry was an old note. Found in Samantha's car, never explained. "You'll never leave this place if you keep looking at the stars." Now, he was sure. Samantha had been taken. And whoever buried her had done everything to keep the past dead and buried. But Henry knew better than most. The past never stays buried forever. The ground that still remembers next morning. The sky hung heavy over Ridley Lake. Thick clouds blocked the sun, and the air felt denser than usual, as if nature itself sensed that something long buried was about to resurface. Henry arrived early. Before 7 a.m., he brought with him a shovel, gloves, a flashlight, and a thermos of black coffee. In his backpack, he carried a small red flag to mark the spot where, based on his calculations and the case files, Samantha might be. He didn't ask for permission, nor did he expect approval. He knew that if it were up to the authorities, he'd still be called the stubborn old man obsessed with the past. But he felt he was right, and the truth Doesn't need permission to come to light. The chosen area was 75 feet from the main trail, past the curve where the dogs had lost the scent 30 years ago. It was a small patch of land, slightly sunken compared to the rest around. There were twisted roots, dead leaves, and moss-covered stones. He dug carefully, patiently, with the kind of reverence that only those carrying guilt can truly understand. Every shovel of dirt was an apology. Around the 10th dig, the soil began to change color. A darker tone, damp. Henry dropped the shovel and began digging with his hands, catching the faint metallic scent rising from the disturbed earth. Then he felt it, something hard, foreign. He pulled gently. It was a piece of floral fabric. He recognized it instantly. It was the same pattern as the dress Samantha wore the night she disappeared. His heart pounded. He paused to breathe, then continued, now with trembling hands. Beneath the fabric, a fragment of bone slowly emerged. Delicate, but unmistakably human, the tears came without warning, not just from grief, but from a painful blend of relief and regret. He had found Samantha. Or at least, what was left of her. Henry marked the site with the red flag and called the police. "This is Henry Callahan. I need you to come to Ridley Lake. Bring a forensics team." "What's going on, Mr. Callahan?" the dispatcher asked, still skeptical. "I found the body." Pause. Samantha Blake's body. Within 2 hours, a patrol car arrived, then the forensic unit. The area was taped off and the small clearing filled with voices, camera flashes, cautious footsteps. The local sergeant, now pale, approached Henry. "How did you know where to look?" Henry pointed to his head. "Because this place never left here. The full excavation took 2 days. They recovered bones, remnants of the dress, a beaded bracelet later confirmed by Samantha's mother, and a necklace with a star charm, a symbol she always wore out of her love for astronomy. The evidence was enough to confirm the remains' identity. After 34 years, Samantha Blake was officially brought home. The news hit Somerville like a bomb. Headlines read, "Samantha Blake, case solved after 3 decades. Deathbed confession leads retired detective to the truth." The detective, who never forgot that townspeople reacted in different ways. Some cried, some apologized to the family, and many remained silent. A heavy silence. The kind of silence that suggests maybe they knew, or chose not to. Kyle Ramsey's name returned to the spotlight. He was detained for further questioning. This time, with evidence, the story could no longer be swept under the rug. Donnie Fields. The second suspect was never found. But with Samantha's remains recovered and the recorded testimonies from Franklin and Kyle, the prosecutor moved to officially reopen the case. A posthumous indictment for Donnie. And a real trial for Kyle. Henry watched it all unfold from his hotel window, quietly. He declined interviews, turned down podcast invitations. He only made one phone call, to Samantha's mother. Her voice was weak, but clear. "Thank you for not forgetting her." That night, he returned to the lake. The crime scene. Tape was gone, the clearing was empty. But the marks on the ground remained. And on the tree nearby, someone had hung a handwritten note. "You always looked at the stars. Now we look to you." Henry knelt down, touched the earth with his hand, and, like sealing a fulfilled promise, whispered, "I came back, Sam. It took time, but I came back." Asterisk justice without timeth, Dorchester County Courthouse had never drawn so much attention. In recent years, the most common cases involved minor traffic violations, inheritance disputes, and the occasional bar fight. But on that day, the town came to a halt. Kyle Ramsey, now 50, walked in, handcuffed, his face aged, stubble on his jaw, hollow eyes. At his side stood a defense attorney who clearly knew there wasn't much to be done. Across the room stood Henry Callahan, in a dark suit, holding a folder containing all the documents, from 1991 and from now. Between them, time, silence, and a girl who wasn't there yet filled the room as if she were alive. The judge was direct. He read the charges: criminal negligence, obstruction of justice, and complicity in homicide. Samantha's body had been officially identified days earlier. The forensic report indicated trauma consistent with a physical struggle and a fracture at the base of the skull, likely caused by a violent push. There was no doubt. She had tried to run, she was stopped, and she hit her head on a rock before being buried. Still alive, Kyle, confronted with the evidence, did not deny it. I was there. I saw Donnie grab her. Saw her fall. And then he said we had to make it all disappear. And I obeyed. The hearing didn't last long. Kyle took a plea deal with the prosecution to confess and assist in the reconstruction of the crime. The sentence? 15 years in prison. The possibility of parole after 10. The decision that sparked outrage in part of the community. But Henry knew this wasn't just about punishment. It was about acknowledgement, about giving a name to what was wrong, about saying out loud that Samantha existed and that she had been wronged. Samantha's mother, now in her 70s, watched everything on television. Sitting in her living room armchair, surrounded by portraits of her daughter, she listened to the sentence with teary eyes. And when the broadcast ended, she whispered, 30 years for the world to hear what I already knew. Oh, but it's okay. Now she can rest. The town reacted in mixed ways. Some saw Henry as a hero. Others as a shadow who returned to reopen wounds that had been forcibly closed. Some believed he was obsessed, that it was too late, but deep down, everyone knew. He was the only one who never gave up. The city council organized a symbolic ceremony. At the lake, at the very spot where Samantha's body had been found, a wooden cross was placed with her name carved by hand. Hundreds of people attended. People who, for 3 decades, had gone on with their lives, not knowing or pretending. Not to know what had happened on that hot summer night in 1991. Henry spoke simply. I've failed her once, but her memory brought me back. Today, justice isn't complete, but it is real. And may this never happen again. To any girl, anywhere. The ceremony ended with a symbolic gesture. White balloons were released into the sky, each one bearing a word written by a community member. Sorry, longing, justice, forgiveness. One balloon carried written in a child's handwriting. If you look up, I'm looking too. After the event, Henry received a handwritten letter left by Rachel Green, Samantha's best friend. Henry, I never knew how to say thank you. I spent my whole life thinking I should have done more, that I should have stopped it, seen it, screamed. But you did. You heard the silence. Thank you. Or Henry folded the letter gently and placed it in the inside pocket of his coat. Then he walked to the bench where Samantha used to sit and stood there in silence, watching the reflection of the sky on the lake's calm waters, the same water that once hid the truth. Now, at last, allowed it to rise. The last steratum arrived slowly in Somerville. The leaves began to fall from the trees, as if each one carried a sigh from the story the town had finally dared to tell. It wasn't ordinary grief. It was the kind that mixes sorrow with relief. Like holding back tears and breath at the same time. Like someone who waited years for an answer, and when it finally comes, doesn't quite know what to do with it. For Henry Callahan, the cycle was coming to an end. But not without leaving its marks. He spent his days at home, reorganizing files, digitizing every document from the case. Every newspaper clipping, every statement, every map. He created a complete digital archive and sent copies to Samantha's family, the state police, and a nonprofit organization that fights against wrongfully closed cases. He wanted to make sure it would never be lost again, but there was still something he needed to do. On the night that marked exactly 34 years and 4 months since Samantha's disappearance, Henry returned to Lake Ridley. The place had changed. A small memorial had been built there. Simple, beautiful, with light stones and her name engraved in bronze. Samantha Blake. 1974 to 1991, she looked to the stars. Now, we look to her. Beside it, a telescope had been installed, donated by a local school in honor of Samantha's love for astronomy. Henry sat on the same wooden bench as always. The one where Rachel had said Samantha was last seen. He looked up at the sky. It was clear, wide, sprinkled with stars. Okay? And there among the constellations, he searched for one. Just one. Found you, Sam, he whispered. That same week, he wrote a letter, not to anyone in particular, T needed to let it out. Key wrote it by hand and left it at the base of the memorial. I searched for you for 30 years, and I didn't know what to say when I found you, but I know you found me too. They promised you the sky, and they took even the earth from you. But today, the town knows your name. And where there once was silence, now there is memory. Sorry I didn't see it sooner, but thank you for never leaving. H. The days moved on. The trial came to a close. Kyle Ramsey was convicted. Samantha's story was published on national news sites, and a journalist from Boston wrote, "She never had a voice, but her memory screamed until someone listened." And maybe that's what defines delayed justice, when the cry of someone who was silenced finally crosses time and finds an echo. Henry, now 74, received a letter from Samantha's mother. It was short. It simply said, "She's at peace. So am I. Thank you." He smiled, closed his eyes, and for the first time in many years, felt lightness. Samantha Blake was no longer the girl from the lake. She was a full name, a story, a memory that no one would ever have the right to erase again. Asterisk, asterisk, a life should never be forgotten. Samantha was erased on a summer night. For 3 decades, her story was buried in silence, fear, and neglect. But all it took was a single confession, whispered through guilt and fading breath on a deathbed, for the truth to rise to the surface, and for a man who had given up on everything to find his purpose once again. This story isn't just about a crime. It's about time. It's about memory, and about how, even after so long, justice can still arrive and touch all of us. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel for more real stories with emotional and unexpected endings. Turn on notifications every week. You'll discover stories of people who deserve to be remembered. Comment below. Do you believe late justice is still justice? Share this video, because every time Samantha's name is spoken, another injustice loses its power.